Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back with Sophie Le Corre to discuss The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake. Today, we are going to hopefully finish up the Proverbs of Hell section. And Sophie, why don't you read the stanza we're going to talk about first? The damn braces, bless, relaxes. Or
Okay.
could you recite it for us and then we'll talk about it?
Damn braces, bless relaxes. The best wine is the oldest. The best water is the newest. Prayers plath not. Prayers plath not. Praises reap not. Joys laugh not. Sorrows weep not. The head sublime, the heart pathos, the genitals beauty, the hands and feet proportion. As the air to a bird, or the sea to a fish, so is content to the contemptible. The crow wished everything was black, the owl that everything was white. Exuberance is beauty. If the lion was advised by the fox, he would be cunning. Improvement makes straight roads, but the crooked roads without improvement are the roads of genius. Sooner murder an infant in its cradle than nurse enacted desires. Where man is not, nature is barren. Truth can never be told as to be understood and not to be believed. Enough or too much.
Excellent job. I'm sorry if I intruded there prematurely. I had a page break in my notes, and so I was about to jump in there and say thank you for doing such a good job reading, Sophie. But I'm going to say it now. Thank you for doing such a good job reading. So, damn braces, bless relaxes.
Yes.
I didn't have
Brace.
anything. I didn't have anything for that line. Did you have something to say about that?
I'm
Uh,
just looking for the translation of the words because I'm not sure about what it means.
well,
Oh.
well, that's an interesting thing. There in English, there's multiple forms of damn, and maybe this is something that is worth our attention, right? We have a dam that is a physical structure that is braced against the. I mean, I'm not some sort of hydrologist, so I couldn't tell you if I'm using the right terminology, but is braced against the physical force of water, so as to back it up in order to make electricity or do it whatever else dams do. But a bless relaxes. And then we also have a dam in terms of like damning someone, right? Like we're issuing some sort of decree about their destination that they will be damned.
There
Um,
are a lot of songs with the word damn.
yeah, a lot of bands too. I used to listen to a punk band or like a pop punk band called The Damned, and the Damn Builders, which was a underrated '90s band. I like them a lot too. So, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we're being given something here potentially about water, and what Blake is trying to get at here in terms of like a dam will back things up, right? But a bless will allow the flow, and perhaps that says something about uh, the attitudinal approach that we have to others. Now, I mean, if we're going
Hmm.
around constantly damning people, damn this person for existing, damning my own life, da 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 da, there might be something about being backed up here versus the free flowing natural state that a blessing confers. Perhaps that's what he's getting at. I didn't think about it too much because it seemed kind of obvious, but this is one of those episodes where uh, you being a non-native English speaker and it being a bit somewhat challenging makes me think about it in a deeper way. So it's actually good. What do you think about this?
Yes, I think I agree with your last interpretation. It seems to me that Blake uh, in this poem in particular, then he's a bit of a libertarian, I think, and he doesn't want to he shows that he doesn't want to condemn people for not obeying to some rules, or so it seems to me that he would recommend blessing rather than damning people.
Well, and what we have to keep in mind here is this is being written from the perspective of hell, or the we're not talking about the voice of the devil, but we're talking about the proverbs of hell, and Blake's descent into like kind of a Dante-esque descent into the underworld. You could argue that this might be Blake incriminating God for damning people, and that there's something problematic that God damns people at all when really it should be nothing but blessings. Do you think that might be something that Blake is hinting at?
Well, I don't think he would think this is God who is damning people, but rather maybe organized religions, perhaps.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. He's talked about throughout this poem his problems with religionists. I guess it gets a question about how organized does religion have to be organized religion. Like, for instance, if you've got authoritarian hierarchical church structure that is damning people and making them feel like there's nothing that they can do to free themselves from their sin, and manipulating them into, I don't know, I mean, just to cite something from the past, like paying indulgences or something like that. But presumably there's got to be some like organization, like reception to scriptures or something like that, unless Blake is going to be totally done with that altogether and only use our ability to perceive the infinite in nature as the revelation that mankind needs, that it doesn't need organized scriptures. I guess I'm uncomfortable to say that Blake would do away with scriptures entirely because of his relationship with Swedenborg and the scriptures that Swedenborg presupposes and interprets to fulfill his own prophetic download. So I don't, Blake is so familiar with the scriptures, it's hard for me to say that he personally would deny them altogether. But they have to be organized somewhere.
Yes, we are going to see this later, but it seems to me that Blake is defending the prophetic aspect of religion. And so he may, we are going to see how he views the Old Testament prophets. But I think that's his relationship with scriptures. He's really taking the side of the prophets.
Well, maybe we can have the best of both worlds, where you can still hold on to the prophets of the Bible and you do without, but perhaps do without the theology that organized religion has offered as explanation for those prophecies. But I know I read ahead a little bit. I mean, I've read this before, but I hadn't really diagnosed it. I started diagnosing it a little bit this morning, specifically the parts about Isaiah and Ezekiel that he mentioned in A Memorable Fancy.
Yes.
It seems like he's going to do the thing where he's going to twist what the scripture is actually saying, but maybe not.
Yes, when you say this, when I read about, we are going to talk about this in the next episode perhaps, but when he meets Isaiah, it immediately made me think about Carl Jung, and in his Red Book, when he meets biblical characters as well. And I think this is similar, that Blake is having some visionary experiences with biblical characters.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to dig into that. But let's finish out these proverbs of hell. The next one, the best wine is the oldest, the best water the newest. And that, you're from France, you guys like wine, and perhaps you would agree with that. But the thing that this made me think about was Luke 5:37 through 39. And no
You
man,
can, yes.
what's that?
Is it the wedding?
No, but that's probably worth looking at. Well, it might be. I have to look in context. I feel like this is a separate parable. It says, "And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, else the new wine will burst the bottles and be spilled, and the bottles shall perish. But new wine must be put into new bottles, and both are preserved. No man also having drunk old wine straightway desireth new, for he saith the old is better." So, no man also having drunk old wine straightway desireth new, for he saith the old is better. So I guess we're, at least in this particular parable, what we're being told is that the inside and the outside, if I'm doing a little on the moment exegesis, I could be wrong, but it seems like what's being said is that when men are transformed by the new wine, both inner and outwardly, you don't just displace the old wine, but you also replace the container that it was in. That is a complete remaking of the previous artifact, and also that those who are hooked on the old wine are going to have a hard time accepting the new wine. And because we're talking about wine, and we ultimately get the idea that wine is a sacrament standing in for the blood of Jesus Christ, or if you believe in transubstantiation, actually is that. I think I think what we have going on here is kind of perhaps a veiled shot against accepting the blood atonement of the New Testament. But this could be me reacting to this. What did you think about this line?
Well, first about the biblical passage you talked about. I think it's when Jesus is in conflict with the Pharisees, and who do not want to accept his new teachings. And I think it's his way of saying that they are not ready to accept his teachings because they are not ready to transform themselves. But the verse, the line from Blake's poem, I don't know if it has the same meaning, but wine and water, I think, are used as often as symbols of spirit.
Well, that's true, and we see them combined when Christ is crucified, do we not? When
Yes.
At the crucifixion of Christ, there's this very odd thing that happens, right? Do I have it? Oh no, maybe it's blood. doesn't it's water and blood that comes out of the son
Yes,
when he's
water and blood.
but
Yes.
the blood is connected to wine. The wine is like connected to the
Yes.
blood. So I'm not saying there's not some level of metaphor or figurativeness that's going on here, but
Oh,
I
I
guess what
just
I'm trying to say here is he's also saying the best water is the newest. Well, it, it is the living, there's a lot of water throughout the Bible there, that Christ is meeting women at the well and, he's like, I am the living water that you seek. Presumably this is water that predates if predates the creation of the dry land of the earth, that this is something that exists, um, before other aspects of creation. So the redemptive water that Christ is offering may not be new. That actually may be old. So we have an
yes.
inversion here where he's offering a new sacrament, but the but the same eternal waters that have been shaping our reality since the beginning.
Yes, I don't really know how to interpret the best what are the newest, but it just made me think about our friend Baudelaire again,
Mm-hmm.
and his poem about which is called "Be Drunk,"
Oh yes.
and
Oh yes.
and it seems to me that in the Bible, drunk 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 people like Noah after the flood uh, are people who are in a state of ecstasy. So it's not all about being drunk from wine, but also being in a state uh, of spiritual ecstasy, perhaps.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that the thing about Noah getting drunk after the flood is an interesting aside because have you seen Aronofsky's Noah? Have you seen that? Have you
Yeah,
seen?
I've seen the movie, yes, recently.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think I think Noah must have experienced a sense of gratitude, obviously, when they made when the flood was over and he and his family had survived. But at least the way that's portrayed in the Aronofsky movie, which is not 100, it gets closer to the biblical reality than I've seen other portrayals of the flood. We get these very cleaned up Sunday school versions of it, but there's a lot of Kabbalistic and mystical elements in it that are not necessarily in the scriptures, but in other texts, and you have to have a very discerning eye to pick those out. But uh, either way, it had to be a traumatic experience for Noah to witness all that death. So I don't know if Noah gets drunk out of ecstasy or if he gets drunk out of a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Because I mean, you've got to watch all these living creatures die, and you've got to process that. So I think I'm not necessarily sure Noah gets drunk because of ecstasy.
Yes,
Because there's also, and it's interesting. Because while he's drunk, he's naked, right? And his son Ham comes upon him and sees his nakedness, and there's a curse issued to Ham, and that affects, I believe, Canaan. And I got looking into this because I'm very interested in Hamlet, and I'm wondering if the name Hamlet is connected to the son of Noah, Ham. I was digging into it, but because it is a old Danish name. It's not connected to. I mean, it might be connected to Shakespeare's son Hamnet, but it exists. Shakespeare didn't create the name Hamlet, so I don't know. I think there's a lot of things to think about why Noah got drunk.
yes, I agree. that the historical interpretation may be your interpretation, but the symbolic interpretation may be connected to the experience of the flood, which is happening in everyone, not everyone, but which can happen in everyone's life.
For sure. I definitely think the flood, I think many of the episodes of the Bible recapitulate themselves in the life of the individual. Like, for instance,
Yes.
like I'm probably my favorite book of the Bible is the book of Job.
Yes,
And
me too.
and so I think I have lived through my own Job experience, may still be in the midst of it, may experience another one. So they do seem to recapitulate themselves in different ways. It raises an interesting question if the Bible not only has an objective reality, but if it's like the reality of every psyche as well. And then we get into sort of the Jungian take that you
Yes.
enjoy so much. And that, to be honest, I'm not necessarily against. I just there's so much about Jung I still need to learn. And like I say every time we do this, I hope we can talk about Jung someday soon.
Yes, and this would also be Annick de Souzenels, the French scholar who studied the Bible in Hebrew and had her an original interpretation of the Bible, which could be viewed as a Jungian or psychological. So she not only talks about the historical reality which is told in the Bible, but she's more focused on the symbolic interpretation and what it means for the life of the individual.
Right. Right. Well, maybe we should move on to the third line. Prayers plow not, praises reap not, joys laugh not, sorrows weep not. My only real commentary here was that I thought he might have been intimating that there was something ineffectual about prayer when we know that's not the case biblically. But I didn't really have much more to say besides that.
Yes, I don't know how to interpret this.
Prayers plow not, praises reap not, joys laugh not, sorrows weep not.
Oh, yes, I know. I was thinking when I read this, that Blake is talking about the contraries and the opposites, and I think he's exposing a paradox here.
Well, if you're in hell, you might say that maybe in hell prayer becomes ineffectual, and the things that presumably the things that were your joys on earth are going to be the things that potentially they always do this inversion, right? If like you see this thing, it's like I saw this clip from The Simpsons where Homer goes to hell and like a devil asks him, "What's the thing you love most?" And he goes, "Donuts." And they go, "All right." And they just keep feeding him donuts. So he'll become so miserable and sick on the donuts. And it doesn't work. And the devils are perplexed why they can't torture Homer with overfeeding him with donuts. So maybe there's something with that. Like whereas on earth prayers plow, on earth praises reap, on earth, joys may cause laughter and sorrows cause us to weep. But in hell, maybe that's where the paradox is. These things no longer do what they did on earth.
Yes, I wonder if it's also another explanation could be like we talked about in the first episode, I think, about or maybe it was the second episode when I interpreted the last part of the argument about the contraries. I talked about the example of the cynical person who used to be an idealistic person, and maybe we could interpret this line as saying that every aspect of reality is has a dual nature.
Yeah, why don't you elaborate on that a little much? So can you break that down for me a little bit more? Maybe like with the joy.
Yes,
It
it seems to me
maybe
that,
yeah, just give me an example of how that could have a dual nature.
well, joy, it's quite simple, because I remember we talked about this when we studied the Confiteor of the Artist by Baudelaire.
You have such a better memory than me.
And we talked about there is a line about joy in this poem. I'm just going to read this line.
Sure. You typing adds like dramatic, like radio sound effects to this.
Okay. I'm not sure there is the word joy, but
It might depend on the translation.
in the end of the poem, he's talking about the dual nature of beauty, and yes, actually, the whole poem is about the dual nature of beauty, I think. How penetrating is the end of the autumn day. Yes, penetrating enough to be painful even. For there are certain delicious sensations whose vagueness does not prevent them from being intense.
Right.
And so in the poem, he's saying that every pleasure is not exempt from pain.
Do you for instance, I may have agreed with that at some point, like where for instance, like if I used to take such joy in a song, okay, but there could be a point where I took such joy in the song that I was also overcome with grief and sadness, because it was very touching, and or if you're watching a comedian who's making you laugh and you're experiencing joy because he's doing commentary on something that is true, but ultimately the nature of that joke reminds you of some dire circumstance, right? So there's like a dark humor going on there. So I would say maybe some, for lack of a better word, pagan joys have this mixture of pleasure and pain in them. But if we like a sunset, I don't think if I look at I look at the sunset as a painting that God has made, right? I can't ever imagine looking at a sunset and being overcome with grief, knowing that it is a testimony to God and his promises.
Well, it's not the same experience as Baudelaire.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. It's about the type of joy you're hooking yourself to. So there might, and how you hook yourself to that joy might be the lens from which you see it. Whereas like Baudelaire may look at that sunset and maybe overcome with grief, whereas I would not be, ever.
Yes, I don't think I entirely
That you don't have to agree with
can.
me. Yeah.
Yes, because like I said before, if even the religious experience, Jung would call this the numinous experience, has a dual nature. It's at the same time uh, uh, ecstasy and terror. Um, and I wonder if we take the Christ life, the life of Christ. I think there are episodes in which he's experiencing pain and joy at the same time, especially uh, before he dies, when he's with his disciples and says goodbye to them, and he says how much he loved them,
Right.
and we.
I mean, it's not like being crucified was fun.
Yes, but it's not only that. I don't think his pain is about being crucified. There's maybe maybe he was afraid of this, but I think he's uh, suffering because of the evil nature of human beings and how they cause suffering.
So he may not be experiencing physical pain, but he may be somehow tapped into the evil nature of mankind.
Yes,
This is,
yes,
yeah, I mean, this is a very deep theological question about whether or not God could feel human pain, or if he couldn't feel human pain, if he felt something even more profound. If there was something more profound that God felt during the crucifixion than having nails driven into his appendages. And that raises an interesting
yes.
question. Because a lot
I
of people
think
go,
that
oh, if this is God, he's not gonna be, he's gonna be like Superman. He's not gonna be phased by a crucifixion.
I think this would be Jung's interpretation, because in his book Answer to Job, I think what he says is that the life and crucifixion and resurrection of Christ is an answer to Job's trials, because uh, I in this book, what I understand is he says that God, the Old Testament God, could not understand Job's perspective because he had not experienced suffering in the human life, and that it's the reason why he incarnated in Jesus Christ, in order to experience a human life. So like, I don't know who said this, God became man so man can become God, or something like this. uh
Well, yeah, but we want to be careful there because, I mean,
yes.
yeah, I think
And
we can
I
become
want.
sons of God, whatever that may mean, but I don't think we could ever displace God
Yes, but
himself.
it's. Yes, it's the actually it's the Orthodox Christian they, in the Orthodox Church, they have a version of uh, how do you say this in English?
I mean, there are some perplexing passages in the Bible where I think Jesus says, "Ye
Yes,
shall be gods," or something like that.
yes, and the Orthodox Christians have a very elaborate interpretation of this. Uh, yes, divine, divine. Uh, um, divinization. Yes, they have a whole theology about this, and it's not becoming God exactly, but becoming the yes, it would be very hard to summarize this.
Yeah.
But it's a very important part of the Orthodox Christian tradition.
It's a big subject, but I think we've taken a good dent in it. Should we move on to the next line?
Yes.
Okay. The head sublime, the heart pathos, the genitals beauty, the hands and feet proportion. There's a lot going on there. The head sublime. Why is the head sublime? Why are the genitals not sublime? Why is the head not proportion? Why is the head not beautiful? Why are the genitals not proportion? Why these particular things? I mean, I instinctively kind of know, but I haven't really expressed them out loud. I'd have to think about it a second. Why do you think he's assigned it this way?
I don't know if it's a reference to the Kabbalah.
To the what?
You know, they have this in the how do you say this in English?
Well, the head sublime. I mean, the head is where. The head is where we have our mind, our consciousness, and presumably, I mean, if we're thinking dualistically, the consciousness is not something that is going to be materially defined. In fact, you might be able to say that this could be a mirror of the divine mind, or a fragment of the divine mind, some might say. But then we get into a question about what is being employed here. What do we even mean by the word sublime? And the only real experience I have with this is like with Kantian aesthetics and how he defined the sublime. And I'm a little rusty with it, but essentially, if I can recall this correctly, the sublime is something that is simultaneously awe-inspiring, but could also like destroy you. Like a mountain range can be sublime because your mind can't grasp the magnitude of it. It so stretches the limits of our ability to conceptualize, but that mountain could destroy us. It could fall down on us. And this gives rise to the sense of the sublime. And maybe every individual is sublime in a sense, because it would be impossible. I mean, I've known you quite well, Sophie, over the years, but I probably could spend every waking moment of the day and probably never ever figure you out. I could probably never restrict you conceptually, and you could destroy me with fire. So I don't know. I'm just riffing here about why he says the head is sublime, in the sense that like maybe every individual defies categorization and is also dangerous. That's what do you think?
I just found the passage from Blake Young and the Collective Unconscious book, which I talked about in the previous podcast, which talks about this line. Do you want me to read it?
Yes, please do.
The head is associated traditionally with the idea or concept-forming capacity, and in psychological terms with the thinking function. It is the seat of Logos, and Logos to man is sublime, for it is the Logos which orders the contents of consciousness, so that meaning can be derived from them. The heart's pathos is carrier of the feeling function, and it is opposed to the head, as Jung suggests. The unconscious is commonly regarded as a sort of encapsulated fragment of our most personal and intimate life, something like what the Bible calls the heart, and considers the source of all evil thoughts. In the chamber of the heart dwell the wicked blood spirits, swift anger, and sensual weakness. This is how the unconscious look when seen from the conscious side. The genitals are the creative aspects of consciousness, yet their creative activity is not that of thinking. They are rather the dynamic activity that springs over the hurdles of logos. Nor are they pathos, for their function refuses to become dissolved in the morass of sensuality. The genitals symbolize rather that intuitive connection between that which is felt as experience and that which is not yet conceived. And from that connection is born beauty, the possibility of a new creation. The fourth and completing aspect of consciousness brings about proportion and balance among all functions. It is made vivid by the metaphor of hands and feet. Hands touch and feel, form and shape. They are the very essence of active sensation. More than that, hands are the means of accomplishing what head perceives, what the heart feels, and what the genitals conceive. The function of feet is to contact the earth and provide man with a base upon which to stand. They are his basis in reality. Feet make it possible for the whole man to exist in a state of balance, which each function related to the other, yet with each operating in its own way. One function may be dominant in one person, another in someone else, but all are omnipresent. As every person is fourfold physically, as expressed by head, heart, genitals, hands, and feet, so is he fourfold in his non-physical aspects, to which Blake inevitably assigns the more essential reality. For Blake, the body is the tangible, temporal expression of the immortal soul. The body exists only to embrace the undying spirit for a moment in time. There is another fourfold nature of man, but this is not ordinarily recognized in consciousness. Blake raises the level of the holy, those aspects of man which are not considered as morally acceptable. So he talks about the pride of the peacock lines, which we talked about. If we are to consider this line from a psychological viewpoint, we might say that the pride, lust, wrath, and nakedness are often repressed into the unconscious, avoided, not talked about. When these attributes are not acknowledged to be aspects of the total individual, they may be seen in their projected form as animals. This has been going on from time immemorial, taking shape in myth, in astrology, and in many other areas of human experience. Like as it is a Jungian interpretation of Blake's poem, it always is going to come back to the four psychological functions. Thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensation. I don't know if you heard of the four psychological functions in Jungian psychology.
Not as like being some sort of foundational doctrine to it. So I wouldn't be able to elaborate more than you've already offered.
And
I'm still kind of
I
figuring
think,
out how it all fits together, like where the archetypes come from, and I need like a
yeah,
visual representation of all this stuff.
I think Blake has also a fourfold model of human being with the four zoas. How
But yeah,
how?
it's called the Four Zoas. I've never read it, but that might be there.
Yes, and the four psychological functions in Jungian psychology are what inspired the MBTI test, psychological test, and so I don't know if you heard of this. The MBTI is a psychological types classification, which is sometimes used in company in order to help employee work more effectively in a team. So in one person, one psychological function may be dominant. For instance, in my job, the thinking function is, I think, the dominant function in most people. In computer science or in scientific jobs, I think the thinking function is going to be dominant. Whereas in artistic jobs or vocations, the feeling function may be dominant.
Yeah, this is, this is the first I've heard of the NPTI. It's NPTI test.
MBTI, yes. Yeah. It's not there is a lot of criticism because this may not be exactly Jungian's psychology. It's inspired by Jungian psychology, but it's not Jung himself who invented this test and this classification.
I might have to poke around and see where I shake out on that. So what about this next line? As the air to a bird or the sea to a fish, so is contempt to the contemptible. Sort of makes sense, the natural habitat of a bird, I suppose, is the air, and the sea for fish. And so the contemptible people that we are dwell in contempt. Is that what it's saying? Like, as a fish dwells in the sea, the contemptible dwell in contempt. I know what contempt means, but let's just think about that for a second. I'm going to look it up, the definition. The feeling that a person or a thing is beneath consideration, worthless, or deserving scorn, disregard for something that should be taken into account, the offense of being disobedient to or disrespectful of a court of law and its officers. Well, Christ was held to be contemptible by many individuals. But did he dwell in contempt?
I think we could interpret it more easily using the next line.
Sure, go ahead. The crow wished everything was black, the owl that everything was white.
Yes.
So he was the light he's the, we're told in John that the light came into the world and the world comprehended it not, right? So perhaps the light does dwell in contempt in some way. If the world is contemptible,
Yes, I would agree with this, but I don't know if it's what Blake is talking
I
about.
know, but I
Uh,
know it's not necessarily what he's talking about, but I also know he's getting these things from somewhere. And this is the condemnation. It's John
yes,
3:19. That light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil.
yes. I think what he's saying in these two lines is that the way, like we talked about in a previous episode, that the way we view reality, uh, we always view reality through our the glasses of our subjectivity,
Right.
and that's what Christ is talking about when he talks about the if you see ah
If you're
I
blinded
need
by
to find
sin, if you have if you're so
yes
blinded by sin.
I need to find the exact verses when he talks about the body being in blackness, uh, because being someone being in blackness because of his sight. Um, uh, hmm. Oh yes, I found it. It's Matthew 6:23. Uh, the eyes are the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness.
Mm.
If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness?
Yeah,
So,
that puts another spin on it, right?
yes, I I think what Blake is saying is we tend to experience a reality which expresses our inner condition.
Right. Right. And because Christ came into a world where people had evil eyes, they were living in a contemptible environment, and therefore they had contempt towards him.
Yes.
Yeah. But the contempt towards Christ could go away if the eye is changed, if the lens is changed, if the light is let in. Then it changes the entire perception of reality. And then the individual is no longer living in contempt nor expressing contempt to anyone else. I don't know. I'm just riffing. I'm just riffing.
Yes, I don't know what
No, it's okay.
to think. I haven't thought about it.
It just came to me right now. For anybody who's listening, it should be pretty obvious that we don't have a script. We kind of just let we leave a
We
lot
do
of
it live.
yeah. We do it live. We just see what comes out. This but I'll probably have to. We'll probably only get to the end of this to the too much today. Um, but the next part says, exuberance is beauty. If the lion was advised by the fox, he would be cunning. Improvement makes straight roads, but the crooked roads without improvement are roads of genius. Exuberance is beauty. It seems like we have another Nietzschean
Yes.
aphorism here.
Yes, and we also have the characters of the lion and the fox, which I equated before with um, aristocratic and bourgeois mindset. That if someone who has an aristocratic, not social aristocracy, but rather spiritual aristocracy, like Nikolai Berdyaev talked about, if this kind of person listened to the man who has the worldly wisdom, then he would not fulfill his potential as a member of spiritual aristocracy. What can I? How can I express it?
I think you're doing good. I think you're doing a good job expressing it, but keep going.
Yes, it's like I don't know if you know the tale of the do you know this in English? The ugly duckling.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
And I think the character, the animal, the swan,
right,
would be the person who has the aristocratic mindset, whereas the other ducks would be the representation of the worldly wisdom, and they would try to summon the swan in order to make him like them. They would try to make him like them.
But the swan has so much more in store for him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Blake is trying to explain.
Right. And that's so unlike things should not be judging or being advised by unlike things.
Yes.
Right? You know, lions shouldn't be listening to foxes about how to be the best lion. It's like, stay in your lane, fox. So,
yes.
Yeah. This next line, improvement makes straight roads, but the crooked roads without improvement are roads of genius. We're told that the way of the Lord is a straight road, and that it does,
when I read that line, it made me think about the usage of autotune in music. Because I've been listening to several videos about this subject, and the technology of autotune is used to make voice in perfect pitch, and I think it was in a video by a musical producer. I think he's a musical producer. His name is Rick Beato. I don't know if he's making videos on YouTube about music and musical theory and guitar playing and songs. And he said that you cannot make blues music using autotune, because blues music is using the imperfection in order to make beauty.
Well, now I want to go out and make a blues record with autotune. When I used to make records, but I ever heard anything like that, you can't do this. I'd be like, watch me. But I understand the general sentiment. I mean, what makes the blues is the imperfections and the suffering and the emotive quality. And if if you play it too good, it becomes something else. You know, you need those flaws in it to for it to be the art form.
Yes, the blues is using slightly off pitch notes, and like you said, these represent the human suffering and the maybe the condition of the fallen man.
Well, I mean, we can. This would be a proverb of hell because we know all the bluesmen go down to the crossroads and make deals with the devil. So of course, this would be a proverb of hell. But it is interesting. I mean, to be fair, the music that I have always enjoyed authentic, imperfect music. But then there's a lot to be said for music that has a lot of refinement. You know, I've done both. You know, I've done very crude demo tapes and I've done very high level production. I've even employed auto tune on some songs that I've made in the past. Not
Wow.
because not because I was using it to compensate for a performer's inability, but to use it as a just another instrument to create a new kind of sound that you wouldn't expect. I w- so I guess I would never use auto tune. I would never use auto tune to fake a singer's voice, but I might. I as a producer when I made records, I would use it as just another way to express yourself. Just as I viewed it the same way as like a guitar player could use a guitar pedal to create a certain sound that he wanted or a certain tone that he wanted or to loop his guitar or something like that. But I wouldn't want it to replace that guitar player so that that guitar player would be inessential. To me, it's just something that it's just another way for them to express themselves. Heck, I would put auto tune on drums if I could, and you probably can, you know? I think you probably get some pretty cool sounds. So,
Yes, there is a creative usage. I think technology is neutral. It's the way you use it which is going to be
right.
creative or not.
Right, exactly. If you're using it to pass off, I think you can tell, right? Like all these like there was a period there. I don't listen to music anymore, but there was a period there that like anyone who got famous like put out a song, like like a famous like someone from a reality TV show or someone who was like on a talk show or something like that. If they got their 15 minutes of fame in America, they would like some producer would come up with a song and have them sing it. And these people are not musicians. And so what they would do is they would create these terrible songs that they have no business singing and they'd be very popular for a second. But then someone like Kanye West, who's a true artist, you know, will just uses uses the auto tune to create to paint his sonic picture. You know, no one I don't think anyone believes that Kanye West is a good singer or is even trying to pass himself off as a good singer when he uses auto tune. He's merely just expressing himself as an artist and he's painting the canvas. But that's my 2 cents, you know.
Yes, and I think Blake as a proto-romantic is going to defend the feeling function against the domination by the thinking function, and the Dionysian against the Apollonian domination.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. It's also, since these are proverbs of hell. I mean, again, it's portraying, you know, it sows this idea that people who are made straight, like Proverbs 3:6, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Well, I think the negative connotation that something like this proverb may be putting out there is that if your roads are made straight by the Lord, that ultimately there's something conformist about that, and the human individuality is done away with, and you're kind of taken over and pulverized and turned into pure matter and made to be an efficient highway for God. But where the real artistic genius is in the meandering, spiraling, crooked roads where someone's like working out their suffering to create something beautiful. So I think this is a false binary. I don't think, but I could see someone who has descended into hell and who's reporting back on the aphorisms of hell for us, those who have not been there, why this would be something that's commonly held amongst the denizens of the underworld. You know, they're there, but it's like at least they're geniuses, right? They're not like the perfectly straight roads or the conformists that have fallen in line with God.
Yes, I'm not sure if every interpretation of God would place him only in the side of straight roads, because like we talked before in the previous podcast, there is this character of the tiger, which was created by Blake in a poem called The Tiger. And some people interpret it as the terrifying aspect of God. And if we interpret God as only the the representation of order, then yes, your interpretation is correct. But if we say that God is both order and chaos, then actually both the straight roads and the crooked roads are part of God.
Well, I think that's an interesting question about what chaos is. And that's a
Yes.
that's a big conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to get some lunch here soon, Sophie. So I think maybe we'll wrap it up with this last stanza here. Sooner murder an infant in its cradle than nurse unacted desires. Well, that is that sounds. This is Nietzsche.
Yes, or psychoanalysis as well.
Yeah, this is the sort of shocking stuff that Nietzsche would say. That as a freshman in college, I was like, "What did he just say?" Got my attention. Where man is not, nature is barren. I don't know what to make of that. I'll just read the whole thing. Truth can never be told so as to be understood and not to be believed. Enough or too much. So what about this line? Where man is not, nature is barren? Well, that's untrue.
I think he's talking about the creativity of man.
The civilizing power of man?
No, not this. Maybe the poetic eyes which man is looking at the world through.
Yeah, this gets. I looked into his concept of poetic genius, and I got some stuff from an Allen Ginsberg lecture, but I'm not. I'll save that for the next time we get together on the next memorable fancy.
And yes, can I just add one remark about the previous line?
Sure.
Yes, I think it's about if we use the Jungian or even Freudian lenses of interpretation, we may say that when someone is not aware of how his desires are controlling him without him knowing it, it's a dangerous situation. It would correspond to the archetype of the shadow in Jungian psychology. For instance, someone is trying to be a very good person in his social life, and he's going to be very authoritarian in his family as a compensation for the efforts he's doing in his public life. And he will not realize it. He will not be aware of the compensation which is occurring in his psychological life.
Yeah. Definitely drinking some from Nietzsche, and these psychoanalysts are definitely drinking from the same fountains. You mentioned that last time. I'm like, how are they all tapping into the same thing? And you were like, perhaps they are, Luke. Perhaps they are something deeper. What about this line, truth can never be told so as to be understood and not to be believed? I thought this was perplexing to me. Truth can never be told. It's just awkwardly phrased. Truth can never be told so as to be understood and not to be believed. Well, I can tell you, I have told the truth to everyone I know, and no one believes me. So we got a problem here. Either.
But do they understand you?
I don't know how I can make it any clearer. So we got a problem. Either, this is from the perspective of hell, okay? But let's just say this is true on all levels of existence. Either I do not have the truth that I think I have, okay? And I'm actually not speaking truth. I'm speaking a falsehood. And that's why it can't be comprehended. Or I am speaking the truth. And I guess, and it's just, you can speak the truth, but it has to be believed. I have to be speaking to people who do not want the truth and do not want to know the truth. Or I am a poor communicator of the truth. So, of course, this goes back to the part where we're talking about how Jesus came into the world and the world comprehended him not. Okay, if Jesus is the truth, he communicated what he was, but few people understood and believed. But in hell, anything that is understood has to be believed. It is the truth. But that's not the way it works on earth. On earth, people do not want the truth.
I'm
and I find that interesting. I find that interesting is though they could go to hell because they go, oh well, I don't want to understand you. Therefore, I'm not going to believe it. Therefore, I'm going to go to hell. I don't know. But I just find this interesting. Truth can never be told so as to be understood and not to be believed. I find this very paradoxical.
Can I read quickly an excerpt from Blake Jung and the
please.
Collective Unconscious book?
Sure.
So the author said, this is a daring declaration of the supremacy of the imagination and the subjectivity of truth. It is certainly not to be universally adopted, but is it not a path that must be explored by the person who would utilize whatever creative potential he may possess? Unchecked, it leads inevitably to a dangerous doctrine, the elevation of excess. Let us see how the consequences. Okay, I'm not going to read everything, but maybe it's about the not objective truth, but subjective truth.
Well, he's got it. He's capitalized the T.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
but that this gets into a larger question about what Blake's doing with his capitalization. You know, I'm not saying that automatically means he's talking about objective truth. It's just I'm looking here at these stanzas, and you know, with exuberance is beauty, he's got both the E and the B of exuberance of his beauty capitalized. So he's got genius capitalized, and he's not just doing it at the beginning of sentences. So there's ambiguity here, since it's at the beginning of a sentence, whether or not he's capitalizing a truth to make it work grammatically, or if he's done truth, the monolithic truth, with a capital T. There's ambiguity here. So
yes, but if we compare to two previous lines we already read, what is now proved was once only imagined. Everything possible to be believed is an image of truth. Truth can never be told and not be believed. It seems to indicate that he's talking about subjective truth and imagination.
Well, do you think it's possible to believe and understand everyone's subjective truth?
No.
No,
but I think he's talking about the inner experience of truth, the individual experience of truth.
It's a humdinger. I mean, we think about it from the perspective of people in hell. Truth can never be told so as to be understood and not to be believed. I mean, if I were in hell, and maybe I'm in hell because I didn't believe on Christ, okay? And who knows where this proverb came from? Maybe it comes from a place of spite, and they say, hey, look, if Christ really was the truth, why was it so damn mystifying? Like, if it really was the truth, how were you supposed to get me to believe that God was both simultaneously a man and a deity? You know, how am I supposed to believe that a God could die on a cross? Like, if that stuff was really true, I ought to have been able to understand it. But because I could not understand it, it's not truth. But then it's like, but because that person has not understood it, this person is also conceivably in hell. Because he was judging everything according to his understanding and made no room for anything else, such as faith. I'm only saying this because I'm trying to keep in mind that these are the proverbs of hell. They're coming from hell. And I'm trying to think of what sort of individual would say this and say, well, look, I would have believed if it just had made more sense, if it had conformed more to my understanding.
Yes. As we said before, the author of the book Blake, Jung and the Collective Unconscious, I read an excerpt about the 4 psychological functions, and he said that the feeling function would be could be interpreted as the could be is associated to the unconscious standpoint, and also was represented as animals in the Bible, and in the Bible these animals represented hell, the energies of which were repressed by the conscious standpoint. And if you take this interpretation of hell as the unconscious, then you could interpret every proverb of hell as the compensation from the conscious standpoint.
Yeah. All right, one more line. Enough! Exclamation point, or too much. This is an interesting way to close out.
Yes.
It is our narrator saying he can no longer take these proverbs? Or is this another proverb? Enough or too much? I didn't understand what was going on here. What did you make of this? It's when we say enough, we're setting a limit. So if like someone's like, I don't drink, but let's just say like someone's filling up your wine glass and you want to be responsible. Okay, you say, that's enough, right? That's good right there. I don't need a whole glass. I just want to do a little taste. Yeah. And then the other thing is too much. Oh, give me a big glass because I'm gonna go on I'm fixing to go on a wine bender this weekend. Something like that. So we have this choice between disciplined moderation or excess. Would someone from hell say you either have to choose moderation or excess? Is that would someone from hell say that? Would that be a saying of hell?
Or it could also be, again, the opposition of the Apollonian and the Dionysian, which Nietzsche is describing in The Birth of Tragedy.
It's interesting. I pick wine because Dionysus is the god of wine, right?
Yes. And the Apollonian would represent the moderation, whereas the Dionysian would represent excess and drunkenness.
Well, and I'm trying to remember The Birth of Tragedy where the Apollonian and the Dionysian are split up, but in the Apollonian, I think for Nietzsche, please don't crucify me for this if I get this wrong, but the Apollonian is like a dream state. It's too much imagination, too much metaphysics, too much of all that. And so there needs to be this calibration from I can't remember the exact, if there's like a sickness that goes along with that for Nietzsche or whatever, but I know he thinks that the Dionysian has to balance out the Apollonian, and the Dionysian is like used as a way to counteract that Apollonian. But then the Dionysian, the drunken revelry of all of that becomes too much, and then the Apollonian is projected out again. And so there's these like two forces within the breast of man that have to be constantly calibrated and go back and forth. So you know,
It seems to be the opinion of the author of the book I already mentioned, that
sure.
Blake is saying that it is a dance. There is a dance of these two principles in the human inner life.
It's just so wild how much Blake and Nietzsche are just like continuing to talk to each other 100 years apart.
Yes.
It's, it was just one of those things I did not expect to happen when we, it was like, hey, Sophie, let's talk about this poem. By the way, we're going to be constantly led back to Nietzsche. I did not anticipate that.
Yes, we're talking about the marriage of heaven and hell, and Nietzsche wrote a book about beyond good and evil.
Oh, that's true.
So
Yeah.
it's not surprising.
Well, yeah, it caught me a little off guard, mainly because I've just got so many irons in the fire. Sophie, I have got to eat some lunch and take a little nap. And we've been going here for about an hour and a half. Is there
It was
anything?
a long,
Yeah, one of our
long
longer ones.
episode.
Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I think I've said all I wanted to say today.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who listened today. I will have this uploaded and edited later tonight. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.